Welcome everyone to the 2012 League of American Bicyclists Club Leadership Webinar. It is the rollout of the 2012 insurance package, a very important topic for clubs, and accordingly we have 72 people here already and many more people registered. I hope it will be a useful session for you all. We have with us Marla Peters, who is the Vice President in charge of special programs at American Specialty Insurance, who is our insurance broker and have worked with us, I believe it's 20 years now on the insurance program. And she will be handling a presentation tonight, and also Andy Clark, who's the president of the League of American Bicyclists. Good evening, Andy. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Scott. It's a pleasure to be with you all this evening, and I want to just say a couple of words of introduction, if I may, and welcome everyone to the webinar. And thank you on behalf of the League for the support that you as clubs and affiliates and advocacy groups give to the League. We've got a big year ahead of us in 2012. We really appreciate all of your support. We have about 650 affiliated local recreational riding clubs and about another 200 advocacy organizations that are affiliates. And the work that you all do at the state and local level, the opportunities you give people to get out and ride, which is, after all, what we're all about, is really remarkable. And the insurance program is one of the programs that we offer to enable you to get on and do that with as little fuss as possible. And it's my pleasure to welcome the American Specialty team this evening to join us and to roll out the insurance information. As Scott said, we've had a 20-year relationship with American Specialty. They do a fantastic job, I think, and we get good feedback each year. And each year we try and stay on top of the issues that you all have as clubs, and we try and evolve the program to stay on top of the issues that you raised with us. And we're doing that again this year. So Marla's going to give us an overview of the coverage and the kind of core elements of the program. Then she's going to run through a few tweaks that we're making to the enrollment process, and Scott is going to manage all of your questions and issues that you may have during the course of the webinar. And we're looking forward to the questions and feedback that you give us. And with that, I'll hand over to Marla and Renee to give us the lowdown on the 2012 insurance program.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to so many people at once without having to travel all over the country. So that's some of the benefits of technology. And one of the things I mentioned to Scott and Andy before we got on the call is that it's always a little bit of a balance, because I know that many people on the phone have probably participated in this call because we've had one for the last several years, and so have heard much of the information before, but at the same time we want to make sure that we share the fundamentals and the information that everyone wants to hear for those people who haven't participated. So we'll try to strike a good balance, and we're also always tweaking the program and trying to improve it and make sure that we are keeping up with all of the, the things that clubs and advocacy organizations are doing differently or new activities. So we, I believe, have some new information and clarifications to share as well this year. A quick word about American Specialty. American Specialty specializes in risk management and insurance services exclusively for the sports and entertainment industry. And our clients include amateur sports, professional sports, motorsports, and what we call it entertainment industry. So our clients range from small, privately owned family entertainment centers to large, high-profile organizations like the NCAA and Major League Baseball. So you are in good company, and everyone here has a lot of years' experience in working on specifically the types of insurance that are important to organizations involved in athletic activities. A little bit of program background. Scott mentioned we are celebrating 20 years of service to the League, and so we definitely wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you. It hasn't been an automatic process. I would like to, make sure you all know that it's not a matter of the League just renewing without paying attention to what's going on. It's far from that. We are constantly in communication, and I would say the League always makes sure that we are doing our job of providing the best customer service and listening to your feedback. And we just appreciate the fact that we've had an opportunity to work with you for so long. We do have 11 individuals. Our company is larger than that, but on our team specifically dedicated to the league, we've got 11 individuals. Myself, you probably view me as the team leader, but Renee is really the face of the league program and has probably talked to many of you on the phone, answered your questions as they come up during the year, worked with you on certificates of insurance, and is generally available as a resource to you. When you see the 24/7 service down at the bottom, that is also Renee, as well as some individuals in our claims department, because we are truly available in the event you need us in the evening or on the weekends when we know many of your activities and events take place. We have over 600 clubs participating in the insurance program, and that's grown consistently. We had around 500 in 2008. The program's available only to league members. And an interesting statistic I thought is that in 2011, 97% of the clubs enrolled online. And again, when we made that available, it increased steadily each year all the way up to that level last year. And so we're going to be talking a little bit more about the enrollment process this year later in the presentation. And we issue about 3,000 certificates annually to provide evidence to the people who need to know that you are properly insured. The program itself, since it has evolved, we used to only talk about this part at the top, which is what I call the base program, which is the coverage you get when you sign up to buy the insurance program. It includes automatically general liability and participant accident coverage, and we're going to talk about what both of those are. But we now also have optional coverages that you can purchase separately, which we'll also talk a little bit about, which are directors and officers liability and non-owned and hired auto liability. And another optional coverage that we didn't specifically list here but is also available is you can purchase an additional $1 million limit of general liability coverage through the league program. So that's another optional coverage we will touch upon. So just to get started on the general liability and what is general liability, to put it in the easiest to understand terms, this is the coverage you need when somebody sues your club. This is the coverage that applies and provides you with defense costs to cover the attorney bills to provide you with a defense, and then in the event there's a judgment or a settlement, this is the coverage that pays that judgment or settlement. I think the best way to understand it is usually through some claims examples. And the three types of areas that are generally covered are bodily injury claims, property damage liability claims, and personal injury claims. Personal injury claims, I'll just start with that one because I don't think we've ever had one with the league program. That would be a claim for libel or slander. So if someone in your club or a club officer were to disparage a member, for example, publicly and a claim were brought, that is a personal injury claim for the purposes of this coverage. Again, we have not had one of those, so that's a good thing. A bodily injury claim is the biggest exposure from our standpoint that you as a club or an advocacy organization may have relative to the fact that you put on rides where people are engaging in an athletic activity and can get hurt. Right now we are in the process of closing a claim that has a $300,000 plus bill associated with it when you add the attorney fees plus the settlement that was reached in this case, and it involved a cyclist on a club ride that struck an individual who was walking on a trail. The individual who was walking on the trail had recently suffered a stroke and so had some pre-existing medical conditions, and the fact that they got hit, and it was a pretty substantial impact, and an injury that resulted was made even worse by the fact that there was a pre-existing condition. This other one, which is now closed, and there's about $20,000 in defense costs and settlement reached in this case, involved a participant on a ride who struck a pothole and fell from her bike, and a trailing cyclist ran over her arm and caused a fracture to her arm. And that individual whose arm was broken did bring suit against the club, the county, relative to the condition of the road, and also against the individual rider that ran over her arm. and that was ultimately settled with that individual. Property damage liability, these are going to be usually smaller dollar type of claims, but these are not property damage liability. Just to explain, it isn't coverage for damage to your rider's bike. So if it's your own bike and you are riding your bike and you crash and your bike is damaged, this doesn't apply to that. But it applies to damage that the club or a rider who's participating causes to property that's not within the club's care or the club's control. So this is the first one, which is about $3,000 of damage occurred to a Honda Civic that our rider struck by going out into the intersection at the wrong time. And last year we had a very similar claim, but it was $9,000 to a BMW. So my thought there was that if you are going to run into somebody's car and damage it, go for the Civic and not the BMW. Renee's laughing. I know the rest of you are laughing, but you're on mute. Otherwise, it would be uproarious laughter. The next one, this is interesting also. You could probably see it happening with respect to your club. Some volunteers were tearing everything down at the end of an event, and there was a designated parking area for those people who had come to the event. But the teardown was taking place, and somebody's vehicle was damaged in the course of the teardown, and that person wanted the club to pay, and the insurance policy ultimately did that. And then finally, sports equipment liability. That applies for those times when you do have other individuals' bikes in your care or control. Bike valet, bike corral would be the examples that we're aware of that you've told us about when that most generally happens. And we did have a person with a custom-built bicycle that was stolen, and $3,500 was paid to that individual whose bike was stolen. In terms of who is covered by the general liability policy, it covers the club that has enrolled in the program or the advocacy organization that has enrolled and paid the premium. It covers the members of your club and volunteers of your club, directors, officers, and employees. One question I know we've had in the past on this call is whether there are any specific insurance requirements relative to ride leaders in order for them to have coverage, and there are not. I mean, there may be best practices or things that you require from your club's perspective that a ride leader have in terms of qualifications, but those aren't specified or required in the insurance policy. So they would simply need to make sure that they are a member of the club in order for their general liability coverage to apply. And then the next piece that's obviously very important is when does the coverage apply? What activities does it apply to? We usually look at it in terms of rides in two types of categories. One is your regular club rides that are organized, conducted, and supervised by your club, and that are generally for club members and invited guests. The next category would be those events which we have called special events that are more open and advertised and promoted to the public, and where you charge a fee in order to participate in that ride. And those special events actually have to be reported separately as opposed to your regular club rides, which don't. And you have to pay a separate premium for those following the event based on how many people participated. One question on this topic for the first one, for the club rides that has come up, is what is a quote-unquote official club ride? Because there are obviously forums that may be used for just members of the club to put together their own ride. And it's a difficult question to answer because there's so many versions that could apply, variations. But what we have generally said is the best guideline is that we are going to ask you in the event of a claim, what you, when I say you, your an official of the club, is going to sign off when you send in an incident report that yes, this did occur on one of our club rides. So to a large extent, we have to trust the club to know what are your official rides and what aren't. And from our perspective, a best practice would be to have your own club guidelines established, an official schedule, a standard way maybe that you notify people when it is an official club ride. But again, that may vary by club how you organize your official activities. Bicycle-related activities are also covered, so to the extent you have an annual meeting or regular club meetings that you put on fundraisers. Time trials are also covered. Most bicycle safety courses when I say most, one of the things that we've talked a lot about recently is, you know, this whole topic of clubs becoming more involved in bike education, which is something that the league is very happy to see clubs doing, and also from an insurance perspective, it doesn't pose a problem. The only time we've gotten into a little bit of a gray area, and we would like to make sure that you call and talk to us, is if you are actually being hired and paid or contracted, for example, by a government agency or another agency to provide safety education as more of a paid service. So a good rule of thumb would be if you're paying $83 for insurance premium and you're receiving a $150,000 grant, then that would be a time to call us, because we just want to make sure we understand and that it fits within the parameters of the program. Trail maintenance is something we know many clubs are involved in, and that would be considered a bicycle-related activity and covered. Where it would get into engineering or designing the trails or constructing the trails, again, that's where we are hoping you'll pick up the phone and call, because we don't want you to be on the hook for something that isn't actually covered under the insurance program. And then last topic, bike refurbishment. If you are taking in bikes, cleaning them up, fixing them up, and then perhaps donating them, we know a lot of programs like that are springing up, and they're excellent, wonderful programs for the community. As long as your annual receipts from that are under $100,000, you would be eligible to buy an optional bike refurbishment coverage, which costs $53 per year to add that coverage into the program. The limits of coverage are $1 million per occurrence. As I mentioned, you can also add an additional $1 million limit, and that would be something you would do through contacting Renee, and she would walk through the process of gathering information. It's based on the amount, the size of your club, and the number of special event participants that are involved annually. And usually the cost of that is going to be between $100 and $400, just to give you a benchmark if you're thinking about considering that with your board. The policy does have a $3 million general aggregate that applies separately to each club and to each special event, which just means that, for example, if you had a special event, it means you could not have more than 3 $1 million judgments paid relative to that event. So I have to be careful about saying this, but it's almost like not having any aggregate at all. If we are in that situation, we're in a whole different world that we haven't been in before, so with respect to the league. So the key here is defense costs are not subject to that limit, to either one of those limits. They're virtually unlimited under the policy, and a lot of times on the claims, some of those that we reference, the defense costs well outweigh the judgment or settlement, because often we are wrongly accused or we are successful in defending the club, but it costs a lot to do that. And then I mentioned before there's a sublimit of $5,000 for the sports equipment liability, and that particular portion has a $500 per claim deductible. Scott, should I stop here for questions, or should I do this? This is our last general liability slide.
I would suggest you proceed, and then we'll take the questions as a batch. I think it would make more sense to go through everything and then come back to the questions.
Okay. One of the points that people usually ask about on our call is about the waivers, so I'll just tell you our standard information, and then if you have further questions. One is that waivers are an important method to protect your club. It varies by state in terms of how valuable they are, because some states uphold them more strongly than others. But in those cases that are what we call good waiver states, a claim can actually be thrown out before you incur really any costs on the basis that the person that got injured did sign a waiver. But you should work with your local legal counsel. If you have someone on your board who's well-versed in this area or can access someone, that is definitely something we'd recommend, because the laws vary by state. There is a recommended waiver form that we provide through the insurance site, and also the league makes that available on their website. And we recommend, you can always do more. I would never want to say, do less than this. This is more of a minimum, but our recommendation is that a member sign a waiver once each year for their membership. That would, that'll cover them for their rides that they participate in. And then when you have special events, we suggest that each participant in that special event sign a waiver each time, because those are not individuals with whom you have an ongoing annual type relationship like you do with your members. The policy does not cover commercial bike or repair shops. It is for clubs. It doesn't cover tours that are for-profit tours or commercial businesses that run tours. It doesn't cover racing, although we did specify, we spent a long time coming up with a definition that we thought made sense and it worked with the league. Just because an event has a timed element does not mean that that constitutes racing. But direct competition between individuals would constitute racing, and that wouldn't be covered under the program. If we were covering racing, there would definitely be a different premium associated with it. I mentioned the fee-based contracted services already, where we would just like you to give us a call if you have a situation like that, so we can talk through it and make sure that everybody's comfortable with how the coverage would apply. And then in certain situations, if you have an event where alcohol is related, it's always a good idea to give us a call. If you are required to provide a permit or to obtain a permit for that, or if you are actually selling the alcohol yourself, those are the two kind of red flags where you should give us a call. If you're just having your annual meeting and you have alcohol available for people at that, that would be covered. Alcohol-related loss of that type would be covered. There's an exclusion on the policy that says if you are in the business of distributing, furnishing, or selling alcohol, that the coverage doesn't apply. And so that's why I mentioned those, what we call them red flag areas, where you might want to buy separate liquor liability coverage if you are doing those type of activities. So switching gears to the participant accident, and this is a more straightforward coverage, so I think I can go through this more quickly. This is a coverage that doesn't have anything to do with liability or anyone being at fault or negligence. This just has to do with somebody got hurt while they are participating and they have medical bills. And this coverage provides insurance for those medical bills. It's excess of the person's own health insurance coverage. And so their health insurance coverage would pay first, and it's excess of the policy deductible, which we'll talk about. And then there is also an accidental death and dismemberment benefit. The examples of claims here are ones that, I put these in here just to show that we do have some serious injuries that come through. The limit on this coverage is $10,000, so when you see the neck fracture, for example, the bills obviously could have been well in excess of that, but that's how much the league program paid. This coverage applies during bicycle rides and time trials conducted and supervised by a club, and also during special events. One clarification to make is that the participant accident coverage is really geared toward the riding portion of your covered activities. So it wouldn't apply, for example, during trail maintenance, and it wouldn't apply at a club meeting. And we didn't really have that point clarified very well in the brochure in the past. So we apologize for that, but we did want to make sure that we were being clear on that point, and we're going to clarify that this year in the brochure. The covered activities for the general liability and the participant accident aren't identical in terms of some of those non-riding type things that are picked up under the general liability policy. The limit, as I mentioned, is $10,000 per person per accident. It's excess of a $500 deductible. And one feature that we talked a lot about when we were looking at the rates and what the coverage was going to be for 2012 is that the deductible under the league program can actually disappear. We call it a disappearing deductible, because if the person has other insurance that pays $500 or more toward their injury, then the league's deductible basically goes away. So just to use an example, a person who has a $500 or $1,000 deductible under their health insurance and they have a 20% copay, they're going to have some out-of-pocket medical costs if they get injured and their health insurance pays it. To the extent their health insurance pays over $500, the league policy will just pay that copay and any out-of-pocket deductible they paid, and they'll end up paying zero. So that's a great benefit, and when you're talking to your members or potential members, it's something that you can focus on, because that's unusual to be able to have an injury and not have any out-of-pocket costs. It's a benefit. And the other thing is, if you don't have other insurance, which is, it's not actually, in about 10% of our claims when we looked at the league's participant accident history, it was a situation where the person did not have other insurance. But in that case, the league's coverage applies excess of the $500 deductible up to $10,000 for that person. So it's a key benefit, especially it can be something that if you can pay a person's medical bills, they may be less likely to turn to an attorney to sue you to pick that up. And the accidental death and dismemberment benefit is going to be $5,000 in 2012. It actually, we raised it to $10,000 in 2011, but in the interest of trying to keep costs in line, it was one of the changes that the league decided to make to lower that back to where it's historically been this year. Those coverages that we just talked about, which I referred to as kind of the standard program coverages earlier in the presentation, can be purchased online at the website that you see on your screen. And in the past, you could register online, which, as we mentioned, 97% of you did in 2011. This year, we aren't going to have our standard paper form, but if you don't want to go online and enroll, you will still be able to call us, and Renee will just walk through the process with you on the phone and enroll you that way. So we're not trying to take it away and force you to go online, but to the extent most of you we're going to try to switch over to that, but then still make that service available to help you out if you don't have access to a computer or don't prefer to work that way. Your club premium is based on the number of members, and you pay that at the time of enrollment. Advocacy organization premium is based on what we call active members, which would be those people who are actively involved in running the program throughout the year. And then to the extent the advocacy organization has a few, has some rides, you would also include those, the average number of individuals that participate on those rides. The special event premium is based on the number of participants that participate in the special event, and it's paid after the event. One clarification that we found was helpful is to let people know that they do not have to include your existing membership in the special event participation figure. So if 10% of the people on the special event ride were your members already, you don't need to include them when you report your numbers. And coverage begins at the time you enroll and ends on February 1st, 2012. So the best way to do it is to enroll before February 1st or on February 1st so that you get the full advantage of a full year of premium. The club rates are shown on the screen. I won't read through all of them for you. The rates are increasing this year. And for any of you who were on our previous call, we talked a lot about this because we looked at keeping the rates flat but making some changes to the participant accident coverage. And the league conducted a survey of the membership, and the feedback was strongly in favor of keeping the benefits where they were, even though the premium and the rates were going to have to go up slightly, with the idea that the benefits are great the way they are. They're a great selling point. The league, as I mentioned, did go ahead and lower the death benefit back to $5,000 to keep the premium a little closer to where it was last year. The minimum premium is changing from $83 to $88 per club. So I think that is pretty much all there is to say on that. Okay, non-owned hired auto liability. This isn't one of the optional coverages, and last year is the first year we were able to make this available through the league program. It's not a master program or policy approach like the parts we just talked about. You actually have to fill out an application and answer a few questions. You have to confirm that you make sure that people who drive on your behalf have driver's licenses, for example. And the premium for every club this year that bought the coverage was $250, which is a minimum premium. It's possible somebody could be outside that, but for the most part, I think if you call and fill out your application, you'll probably be at that minimum premium. But this coverage applies to losses arising out of the use of automobiles that your club rents or borrows, basically. If your club owns a vehicle, this is not the coverage for you. You would need to work with a local agent and actually get an auto policy in place for that. But this covers you if, for example, you're using a vehicle during an event and the vehicle causes damage or injures somebody, and your club, as a result, is brought into a lawsuit. This coverage would apply and respond on behalf of the club. It covers the driver of the club, or I'm sorry, of the vehicle, but not if it's the person who owns the car. So in other words, if you own the car, your auto insurance is on the line. This doesn't replace that. But it does protect the club, or if the club's renting a vehicle and an officer or a representative of the club is driving it, it would cover that individual at that time. It has a $1 million limit, and I think I covered the rest of what's on there. You would contact Renee, again, to secure that coverage. Next, switching gears, directors and officers liability coverage. This is coverage for claims alleging wrongful acts committed by the club or by the board of directors, and it covers the club itself, it covers volunteers, and it covers the club's board of directors. You may have noticed that I also mentioned that volunteers and directors and officers are covered under the general liability policy, and that is true. What you need to know is that the two policies cover different types of claims. The general liability covers the bodily injury, property damage we talked about. Those are excluded under directors and officers coverage. Directors and officers coverage is more related to decision making, discrimination. If you had to remove a member from the club because of behavior issues or for whatever reason and they sued you for discrimination, that type of claim would be covered under the directors and officers policy. And also it includes employment practices liability coverage to the extent any of you have employees and you were to have a wrongful termination type of situation. This coverage would apply to that. That coverage is available on the same website where you purchase the other coverages we've been talking about. It's just you click on a different link. It's a very quick application process that takes you through, and the premium is $550 plus a $25 fee for a $1 million limit and $850 for a $2 million limit.
And the dates you have on that slide, Marla, are outdated.
Oops. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yes.
Just we got a question about that. I just wanted to make sure that people understood.
Yes, we will clarify that before this gets posted, or we'll fix that. Then the last slide, you can't tell we're on the last slide, but I'll just let you know. The last slide is that the league cycling instructors and seminar coaches are also covered under the policy as individuals. Those individuals have general liability coverage during smart cycling seminars and anytime they're conducting a class in accordance with the league's general guidelines and what they've been trained to do. The coverage applies automatically. The LCI doesn't need to enroll or contact us in any way. Of course, they can if they have questions. And if you are an LCI and you need proof of insurance to provide to, for example, a facility you may be using for class, then that is something you would do through Renee, and we can get those certificates to you quickly and take care of that for you. So that concludes the insurance summary portion. Should we do you want to do questions, Scott, before looking at the enrollment, or move into that?
Let's take some of the questions. I think there's a lot of clarification we can get through quickly, and I hope that over the next handful of minutes we can cover sort of the general questions, and some of the more specific questions I may put off until after we cover the enrollment form. So one question, what is the definition of membership? Who is a club member for the purposes of coverage?
Well, I've never had that question before. I mean, it's anybody who you are signing up as a member.
Who you're paying a
club.
premium for, right? If you're paying a premium for them, then they're insured, correct?
Oh, right. But we won't know which member you paid or didn't pay for premium for. So I guess we're generally looking at it that if you, for example, sign up 40 members to your club during the course of the year on average, that you would report to us that you have 40 members in your club.
And so
one of the classifications we make is that a family membership will count as 2 individual memberships for the purpose of premium calculation, because I know a lot of clubs have a family membership. And as we mentioned before, advocacy organizations don't necessarily count all their members, because we know they may have very, very large numbers of members who are really just supporting the organization financially and actually not involved in any specific activities that would create exposure to the organization.
I mean, I think the assumption is that the clubs have a definition of membership. It's a rate they pay, or if it's a non-paying club, they have something that defines a member, and they will pay premiums based on that number, and that if there's an accident, you will ask them, is this person a member of the club, and they will answer you according to their own rules.
Yes, that is correct. We don't ask for membership rosters or anything like that as part of the enrollment process. We are relying on the club to let us know if the person was a member at the time of an injury.
And someone else asked, are first-time non-member riders still covered for that first ride of theirs?
Yes.
So, and that's a great feature, because it allows people to try out the club before they ride and get a sense of it.
Exactly. And we have had people ask how do we know that the person, it was really their first ride? And again, it's a matter of the club confirming to us that it was in fact the person's first time participating. So it is an honor system to a large extent that we're relying on.
And we had a couple of questions about electronic waivers. I think in the call that we had in reviewing the insurance, the best practice there was if it's tied to a financial payment, then you consider an electronic waiver. Although there's not case law, there's not a precedent that you can really base that on. Is that right?
Yes, that is accurate.
But so the fact that they've used their credit card to pay for the membership in acknowledging the waiver indicates that, you know, it was them.
Right.
And they meant it.
Yes.
Okay, a couple of questions then about coverage for non-biking activities. If there's a special event that includes also running or walking, are the running and walking portions of the event covered?
No. And that is one of the clarifications I should have made, and it's when we go through the enrollment process, you'll see it's one of the kind of informational pieces we've added to that process. Because we do get that question, are kayaking trips or hiking trips or biking, those type of activities. And the program is limited to the bicycling activities. And the reason for that is that the premium is really based on that particular type of exposure, and that's what the loss history represents. So we would be, in our minds, significantly altering the program to change and add those other sports into it.
Okay, I'm just reviewing the questions a little more, trying to get them organized here in my head. I guess another question about waivers, if you have volunteers working an event, should the volunteers be signing a waiver for their volunteerism, and how does the coverage cover volunteers? Are volunteers covered by participant accident insurance?
Yes, for special events, the participant accident policy applies to volunteers, and yes, we would recommend they sign a waiver.
Okay.
And I should also point out that sometimes people wonder if by signing a waiver, people are also waiving their right to make a participant accident claim, and the answer is no. Those are separate. The waiver really applies to liability and the idea that they are agreeing not to bring a lawsuit against you or to hold you accountable if they get injured. But the participant accident is just a no-fault coverage, and so signing a waiver doesn't in any way impact that.
So the participant accident covers just any accident that's held on a club ride, but we don't, if I remember correctly, we don't cover bikes or any equipment damage in an accident situation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So since we're on the subject of accidents now, which we're never far from in this conversation, when there is an accident, can you talk a little bit about incident reports and how those should be handled?
Mm-hmm. If something does happen, there is, ideally we have an incident report form that's available online, but also when you enroll in the program, you get a packet of materials also electronically, but that you could print out a PDF version of the incident report form so that you could have it available on site if you have a folder or something that an official of the event is responsible for, because it would allow you to then capture the information you're going to want to report, like witness names and that type of thing, right at the time of the incident, which is the best case scenario for everyone involved later when we're trying to go back and recreate facts. So then in terms of reporting it, you could either send in that actual form. It has to be signed by an official representative of the club, or someone could go and report the incident through the same website where you buy the coverage. There's a report incident button. One item that someone had asked about, and I don't know if it was the same person, but we definitely got the question a couple of different times, was whether Social Security numbers are required on that initial incident report. And we are going to leave the question on there, but indicate that it is optional. And it is optional as in you don't have to fill it in online in order to submit the incident report form. For participant accident coverage, the Social Security number will be required, but if you don't feel comfortable as the person getting the information, you don't want to ask for that information or have it in your possession, you send the incident report form in, and we have to subsequently send a proof of loss form to the injured person, and then the injured person could give us that number directly through that form without involving the club. So we're going to make that clarification in response to one of the club suggestions.
Okay. A couple of people have asked about automobile insurance. Do riders, cyclists, automobile insurance typically provide them any coverage at all when they're cycling?
Their homeowner's insurance might. As an example, I have never heard of, no, I don't think the auto insurance would come into play, but in the one large claim example that I referenced, in that case, the individual who hit the pedestrian, her homeowner's insurance paid its limit out on that claim to the injured party. So her homeowner's insurance did respond, and I can't speak, though, across the board. You would need to talk to your homeowner's agent and run that past him or her.
Okay, a couple of questions about still staying on the subject of automobiles. Is the non-owned liability recommended for an event where members are using their own vehicles for rider support, for instance?
I would say yes, and I wouldn't say it's event specific because it's more of a buy it on February 1st so that you can have it through actually it's an annual coverage that runs for a year from when you buy it, since each of you are applying on your own, and it would then cover your club activities during the year. The thing is, the coverage, I would think of it as being for the club. So if the person driving their own car causes an accident or an injury, but then the club ends up getting sued because they say, why did you let this person with no driver's license or with this past history, why did you let them drive in this event? You're just as at fault, and they sue the club. That's when this coverage is going to come into play. But to the extent the driver gets sued for driving his or her own vehicle, that person's own auto insurance is going to have to cover him or her separately. So it's protection for the club.
Okay. Again, just trying to go through this. Someone asked, if we organize a happy hour at a bar for club members, are we expected to have them sign waivers and be covered by club liability insurance?
I would say if you're considering that, you know, an official club meeting is taking place or an official club activity that you've scheduled and that type of thing, that you wouldn't need separate liquor liability coverage because that's going to fall to the bar. I'm assuming the club's not profiting from this endeavor or anything. It's just you're getting together. If it's just kind of an unofficial gathering of people who are getting together there, then it's less likely there would be coverage. Again, we're going to have to look to the club to tell us if they were holding an official club activity at that time.
Okay. Someone was asking when will registration be open. I think I can answer that one. We were saying that we expect it to be open next Wednesday, which I believe is January the 18th, is what we're aiming for right now. Correct?
Did we say that for just the initial people? I was thinking that we might want a few people to run through the enrollment process and then open it up.
Right. So some people may. Okay. Soon. The answer is soon.
Yeah, I'm thinking not next week, but the following Monday is when my thought would be we could start opening to everyone.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I thought I had one question I could answer without help, but alas, no. Someone is asking, their club membership numbers fluctuate between 250 to 300 over the course of the year. Do they pay for potential 300 members or the number that they have when they apply for coverage?
Do we have an FAQ on that? I'm sorry, Renee and I are having a little sidebar because I
think typically what we tell them is to base it upon the highest point of membership for their club.
So the 300 in that scenario. I thought I had the FAQs in front of me where I thought we may actually, oh, I do. But it's so long. I don't know if I can find it that quickly. We may have to do a follow-up on that to know if, yeah, Renee's looking. Yeah, we can go on to the next one, and we'll try to answer it on this call, and if not, Scott will put it in the follow-up notes. Hello?
Hello. Yeah, I think that the follow-up notes will be a great way to get to a lot of the questions. I'm not sure I can get to all of them. I would think at this point, let's go through the sign-up process because it has changed a little bit. So let's look at that now, and I think that'll actually answer some of the questions that we have pending. And then everybody that's out there, we will try to follow up with all the questions that have been asked in the notes. In a follow-up document we'll get out in the next couple of days. So if we don't get to your question tonight, it doesn't mean it's not a good, important question. It just means that I have a pile of questions. So, Marla, back to you.
Okay. Okay, so we wanted to switch gears, and this is still in the demo format. We still have some tweaks and things to do, but in response to the fact that we have, I would say maybe in the last 3 years, we've been getting a lot more questions that are relative to how the coverage applies to things like bike safety education courses and trail maintenance and that type of thing. We felt like it would be helpful to have a more robust enrollment process in which we could answer a lot of those questions up front. In the past, it was more, how many members do you have? Are you a league member? Fill in your information, and the end. That was the whole thing, which I know is a benefit, and we're not trying to get away from that. But it was more incumbent on you to go separately to the brochure and frequently asked questions to have a resource for information about what's covered and not covered. We have changed the process this year to be a more robust enrollment process, but one that will still take you very little time, in my opinion. And 98% of the questions in this enrollment process are information only, and we're going to specify that, and that's one of the tweaks that we still have to make, so that you know when I answer this question, it's not impacting anything other than the website is going to give me some information based on my answer. And the idea is then at the end of it, you'll be able to print out a form that has the questions, how you answered the questions, and then any relevant information that popped up during the enrollment process, so that you have something that's more customized and specific to your club in terms of what you do and what activities you undertake, and you could then share that with your board, for example. So it may look on the surface like a whole lot more and more tedious, but I hope that what you find when you go through it is it's still a quick, easy enrollment process. So the first question, you have to answer yes to this question in order to move on. As we mentioned, this is exclusive to league members. I have to do a little quick work here because it won't let me go on if I don't actually fill something in. But don't do this. I'm not in Idaho, but that's okay. So you'll fill in your club information there, and then it is going to ask you if you are a bicycle club, an advocacy organization, or something else. Now, if you say that you aren't an advocacy organization or a bicycle club, it's going to give you a prompt to send a note to Renee so that she can then get in touch with you and maybe discuss whether the league program is a fit for the type of organization you are. But we're going to ask that you, even though we know sometimes you may have elements of each, that you pick which one most describes you. And the reason we have to differentiate, as we mentioned before, is that advocacy organizations' premium is based on not necessarily the entire membership base. For bicycle clubs, it's going to ask if you are primarily involved in mountain biking, and if you say yes, it is going to tell you that you're not eligible for coverage. But again, you can always feel free to contact Renee. Because the program really is not intended or designed for specifically mountain biking clubs. If you are a recreational cycling club that does some mountain biking, yes, it's not excluded or anything, but if you are a mountain biking club, then we realized, because we've gone through such an automated online process, that we did have some mountain biking organizations that had enrolled, and it really wasn't designed for that purpose. Oops, I didn't say my membership. So you'll go on, and again, that when we ask that membership question, it's going to let you know that, okay, this one's important, it affects your premium at the end. This, again, is an informational screen, just asking a little information about whether you have employees, full-time volunteers, do you have year-round office space. And here's an example. When I said information pops up during this process and that you can then print it, it's just a reminder to you that the league program isn't covering if you have computers or you rent office space, that type of thing. That's just an informational question. This next part is going to take you through the whole, and again, it's all informational, but it's going to take you through the idea of whether you have special events, that type of thing, and I'll just give you an example. So if you say that, are any of your rides open to non-members? Yes, which probably many of you will. And then you say that we sometimes charge a fee for these rides. As we just talked about, for those that are open to the public and you charge a fee, those are special events. So all it does is here it goes on and tells you that information. It also talks about one thing that I didn't talk about on the during our presentation about the coverage, which is that if you do have a ride that you open up to anybody, not just members, but you don't charge a fee, the coverage for the general liability is going to apply for that event, but the key that you need to know is that the non-members don't have any coverage, and they don't have participant accident coverage specifically. which is of concern because if they get hurt and they don't have any insurance and they don't have the participant accident, they may be more likely to sue you. And so we do have an optional participant accident coverage that you can purchase separately, and you would do that, again, through contacting Renee. And you can do that for one-off events during the year. You know, we had just situations where there might have been a ride of silence where it was not a fee type event, but it was advertised to the public, or maybe you were trying to promote riding on campus at a local college, and we had clubs who purchased this optional coverage. So it just prompts you about that information. Then it asks about bike safety education, and if you say you organize and do bicycle safety education courses, it's going to prompt that question I talked about before about whether you are getting, if you're being paid or have grant money, that type of thing. If you say that's always the case, again, it's just going to give you information. If you say never, it won't do anything. It goes on to the next question. And then I'm going to say never there just so we can go through this, because mainly I didn't want to show every question, but just give you an idea of how this process is going to work. Again, if you say that you operate for-profit type of tours, it'll tell you they're not covered. If you say you do racing, it'll tell you it's not covered. If you say you do the bike refurbishment and then that you do have less than $100,000 of receipts, this is where, and this is the one other part of this that isn't informational only, it's actually affects the premium. You can select or reject to purchase that bike refurbishment coverage we talked about. So I'm just going to keep going through. You know, this talks about the question that somebody asked, you know, in terms of non-bicycle related activities. If you say you do those, it just lets you know to please make sure that you have another source of coverage for that. Trail maintenance, same thing. If you say you do trail maintenance, it just tells you a little bit more about it. Again, it doesn't, your response doesn't affect anything. It doesn't affect your eligibility. Did I not? Oh, I didn't click that, I guess. It's not, oh, I'm at the end. Like, it won't let me move on, but it's because I'm at the end. So anyway, that just gives you an example. Hopefully, in looking at it, you can see that if you don't do a lot of these things, you'll go through it very quickly. You'll just answer no, 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 and it'll probably take you about as long as it did before. If you do have, you know, many of these things you're doing, I hope that it's informational and helpful and just gives you more information so that you don't have to go look it up in the brochure. But we also didn't want you to be kind of paralyzed with not being able to go on because you're not sure what the right answer is, because at the end of the day, it's not really affecting your enrollment eligibility for the most part. The question about bike refurbishment and how many members you have is the one that still is affecting your enrollment. The other thing is you will receive a quote number at the time that you first go into the system. So if you get partway through it and then you have to leave and come back, you can just get back in and go back right where you were. You don't have to start over or anything like that. So we've used this type of format with other clients and found it to be really valuable and helpful. So we're hoping that you view it as a positive and a benefit and not a negative that's creating more work for you. And like I said, the printable version at the end I think will be probably the best feature, which I will say was Scott's idea. And I think a great one because that is going to be a good tool to have. So.
Okay. A few. There are a few questions still. And we will try to get to them all. Those we don't get to, we will try to issue written answers to before the insurance before you need to buy your insurance, just to get everything taken care of. We've had a lot of questions asking about non-members on club rides beyond. So we said before that they're covered, they have full coverage, which would include the participant accident and the general liability for the first time they ride with the club, correct?
Right.
But if somebody doesn't want to join, but keeps coming back and hangs with the pack anyway, what is the club's liability regarding that person? How does the coverage, how does that work?
The club's coverage is not negatively impacted by that. The club still has coverage. So that person who likes to come and doesn't want to become a member, they say that something happens and they get hurt or they cause an injury and the club gets sued, the club would have coverage. The individual would not have coverage. And as we mentioned in both of those general liability lawsuits I mentioned, the individual who caused the accident was named as an individual in the lawsuit. So that's something to maybe share with the person who doesn't want to become a member. But I know a lot of people aren't oriented and, you know, they're not, lucky them, they're not focused on that they might be sued at any moment, unlike Renee and I who have been in this business for so long. But the club is not compromised. Really, their coverage is not compromised. And I think some clubs even have that as more of their structure, and we understand that. I learned that from some of the in-person meetings I attended, that not all clubs are structured such that the regular rides are really restricted to their members and invited guests.
Okay. And I am just reviewing the other questions here to try to find a nice segue, but instead you're listening to me stammer about the...
Just find an easy one.
Okay. No, I've found a difficult one, but it's the only one like it, so that makes it easier because I don't have to try to massage the other questions. One of our attendees is finding that more and more government agencies are requiring addendums to the standard insurance certificate. Have you dealt with that? And what should a club do if they're told that the certificate you've issued isn't going to cut it?
Anytime a club has an issue with the certificate that it's not being accepted by the other party, they should get in touch with Renee, because we can just walk through, is that language we can put on the certificate? Is it language we can't? And the other thing that we can help you with, and not many clubs take us up on this, but we are definitely available to review the contracts that you're signing with those entities. We aren't attorneys, so we're not doing a legal review, but we can look at it and say, just so you know, what you're agreeing to there isn't covered by the insurance policy. Or this looks like it's in keeping with standard requirements and it is covered by the insurance policy. So we can help from that perspective also.
Okay, that's pretty much my answer when people ask me insurance questions. Renee. I just say talk to Renee. She's lovely, everybody. She's very helpful. Talk to Renee. Looping back a little bit to the non-member question. So if someone, I would imagine whether it's a member or a non-member, if somebody refuses to sign a waiver, how should the club handle that?
I think, you know, it's really going to be the club's discretion at that. It's what we call a business decision, although I know you're nonprofits, but you know, we would call that a business decision because you are just accepting that if the person is writing and hasn't signed a waiver, that they have not given any chance for you to get that lawsuit thrown out on summary judgment at the beginning. Now, in some states, signing a waiver doesn't provide as much protection anyway, so what you're giving up is not as much. And that's a reason that it's important to work with legal counsel so they can educate you. Because if you're in a waiver state where waivers have very little value, we still think it's good to sign them because we can use them as a defense tool, even if the case doesn't get thrown out. But you know, you're not giving up as much as you might be in a state that really upholds waivers, where it's going to be a great defense tool. You know, there's always the concern I know that people have that, well, if we refuse to let them be a member because they don't sign a waiver, then they might sue us for that. And that is, I suppose, a possibility. There's not a right, though, that I'm aware of to participate, you know, a legal right to allow someone to become a member of your club. Just like there's not a legal right to volunteer for any organization you might want to volunteer for. But any questions like that, I would always get the advice of local legal counsel to walk through the pros and cons and the different elements of what you want to consider in making that decision.
So in this case, the answer is not Renee. See, again,
Right.
I think I have the answer to everything. Right. So, no,
You
but...
could call Renee.
Right, but yeah, and she would tell you to consult with local legal counsel just to give you
That's right.
state-specific information to allow you to make that business decision
Right.
about how to handle the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, again, as with the non-member rider, it's hard to keep somebody from riding with you. So just helping, I guess, the club be, you know, comfortable if someone's tagging along, but always refuses to sign a waiver, which probably every club has that guy, I bet. I can even picture him.
Everyone else just has to ride faster than this person. And leave them behind, but don't race.
Someone asked just for an explanation of the sports equipment liability again. How does that work? Was that, for instance, with the stolen bicycle? Is that the coverage that covered that?
Sports equipment liability is just a term that we use. That when we talked about property damage liability, that applies to property that's not in the club's control or the club's care. So it's some outside property that you damage, basically. But we added an enhancement to the policy, and we refer to it as sports equipment liability that does cover, on a limited basis, damage to property that is in the club's care or control. And the instances that we know of that are most frequently where this occurs would be a bike corral or possibly a bike valet service. And so in the event that damage occurs to bikes in a bike corral or a bike is stolen, that's when that sports equipment liability benefit, which has a $5,000 limit and a $500 deductible, can come into play.
Okay, quick, easy question. I found that easy question you asked me for. How can people pay for their insurance coverage? Credit card?
No, we actually do not have the credit card option available on the website. So the way it works is when you enroll in the program online, you will actually do an ACH transaction through your checking account, the club's checking account, I would assume.
But you handle it online by providing the account information.
Right, right. While you're enrolling online, you'll put in your account number and routing number, and that will then automatically do the transaction, take the money out of your account, and transfer it here.
And that is your option, or you could also put a check in the mail, or no?
I don't think, well, last year the 15 clubs that didn't enroll online probably did pay with a check. This year we'll have to, when Renee goes through that with the club on the phone, we'll have to figure that out. If somebody wants to send a check separately, we'll probably just need to do something on our end in the system, which I'm sure we can accommodate. Or they can provide the routing number and it will just get entered on our end and won't be saved here anywhere.
I think I'm back in my comfort zone. The answer is talk to Renee.
Right.
But the easiest, most direct way, signing up online, is to do the ACH transaction, which involves providing the checking account information.
That's correct.
Okay. Some people have special events in which when you sign up for the ride, you become a member. Membership in the club is part of the event. It's something that you get for participating. At that point, is it a special event from your standpoint? Does it require special event coverage?
So everyone on the ride is a member.
Yes, and they may sign up as members day of the ride because it's part of membership, but they are all members at the moment that they hit the asphalt. Their wheels hit the asphalt. Let me clarify.
Then that would need to be considered a special event because The criteria that triggers that you have to report and pay for the event separately is a two-prong. It's that it is open to non-members and a fee is charged. So in that scenario you just described, it's, technically it's open to non-members, but it really isn't because they all become members. So I would say that first prong is not met, and so therefore it's not a special event.
Okay. But if you have questions, probably the thing to do is talk to Renee.
Yes. I was just thinking that myself.
Okay. And, I mean, in terms of, for a special event waiver, do you have any preference in terms of when the waiver is signed, before they pay the fee for the event, after the fees are paid, as part of the sign-up process? Does American Specialty have any preference for how the waiver is presented to riders for a special event?
No, the key with the waiver for a special event is that it is collected before they start riding in the event, and that you save it. And again, that's a loaded question, because then people are typing in, how long should I save it, which is a difficult question to answer because the statute of limitations varies by state. And with minors, it doesn't even start running until they reach the age of majority in that state. But we usually say that, keeping it at least as long as the statute of limitations would be a minimum. And because that's the key, is having it when somebody brings a lawsuit against you. Now, especially if especially that a serious type of an incident occurred, then you want to, ideally if you turn in that incident report form to us, you could send the waiver in right then. But a lot of times it's not known that someone's going to sue you. But if a pretty significant injury occurs, for example, where the person's arm got fractured, that would be, in our opinion, something that you should report as soon as possible. And if you have a waiver, to send it in, because then we'll have the waiver on file in our claim file.
Okay. We do have a lot more questions. I apologize to everyone whose question we have not gotten to. One important question. People want Renee's contact information again.
Definitely. And we should put that in the is the PowerPoint going to also be available along with the audio, Scott?
Yes, it will.
Okay, we'll include Renee's contact information in there also, but her direct line is 260-673-1135, and you can also call toll-free 800-245-2744, extension 135, or ask for Renee. And then her email is rwatterson, S-O-N, at amerspec.com.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who's answered a question. For those of you that didn't get answers this evening, we will go over these questions. We will publish some follow-up notes to try to get all of those questions answered. And again, the answer to every one of those questions is call Renee. But to save a little time, we will try to present an answer to every question that everyone's asked, every question that we haven't gotten to. We will try to answer those for you. But now, since it is about 9:20 here on the East Coast and getting later everywhere, I'd like to wrap things up. Thank you so much, Marla and Renee, for the information tonight, for working with us for so long and treating our clubs so well. Andy, did you have anything you wanted to add before I let Marla have the last word? If you may.
No, maybe the only thing I would add is Scott, is if there's just one more reminder about the timeline, when the information will be available, when the enrollment will be available, when everything starts.
So we are targeting, I don't have my calendar in front of me, so not next week, but the following Monday, which I think is the 23rd. Is that? Yeah, I think that's the 23rd, to be open for everyone to be able to go online and enroll, who wants to enroll prior to February 1st. It'll give everyone that week to do that prior to.
Okay,
And
and
we will be sending out reminder emails to everyone like we do every year as well to remind people it's time to renew and website's up and running. And then I think we'll do the brochure mailing, I think, as well, Scott, in conjunction with the league so that people can get a hard copy also.
okay, terrific. And we are, we've revamped the sign-up process. We are revamping the brochure. I have seen really this year, with this renewal and with this new form, a real leap forward in clarifying things and making sure that the clubs understand what they're getting. And I think that's great, and I hope that the clubs see that and feel that and understand and embrace their insurance even more than they have in the past.
So, well, if I have the last word, I just want to thank everybody for participating. I know apparently insurance is the most popular topic for the league membership, which is fantastic, but I know it isn't always everyone's favorite thing to do in the evening. So we really appreciate it, and we appreciate all the feedback that we get and the great suggestions throughout the year so that we can keep making the program better and keep up with what you are all out there doing. So thank you.
Thank you, and good night, everyone.